Greetings. This 20-minute presentation was designed for viewing at my local community discussion forum and was not meant to be exhaustive. The community was able to ask questions based on the video content. Because the video references ancestors in the Hebrew scriptures known as the Old Testament, some during the discussion were not familiar. For example, they didn't know who the sons of Noah were. You simply cannot accurately research the history of melanated people or any nations really without using biblical narratives as history. Second, the format of the presentation was not meant to show who the so-called African Americans are, but to represent facts showing why we are not Africans. As a bonus, we also discuss why Africans aren't Africans either. Lastly, I like to give a big shout out to Dane Calloway. After watching one of his videos, I thought he did such a great job with the visual effects. It inspired me to update my presentations. Oh, but don't get me wrong, I am a PowerPoint guru. However, this new layout is awesome. Thank you, Dane. Feel free to leave your comments or question in the comment box below. Peace and a hop. Researching the history of a people called African Americans is unlike traditional research and doesn't require a PhD. We are a people with a hidden history, not a people with no history, and what wasn't hidden was deliberately destroyed, and what was prevented from being destroyed was veiled in languages not our own. But don't be discouraged. Buried treasure is neither easily found nor meant to be buried forever. May the wisdom of the Most High Creator continue to be with His people. During this 20-minute presentation, I will address two important questions that should take us to the heart of the matter. One is simple, perhaps. The other, perhaps not so simple. Our first question, what is an African? In American compulsory school, we were taught that Africans are all black, brown-skinned people, no matter where they resided, can trace their origins back to the continent called Africa. Do you recall learning about the Out of Africa theory, alleging that all people came from a single source found on the continent of Africa? Well, if that be true, then why aren't all people, melanated and non-melanated people alike, called Africans? My next question, how did Africa get its name? Before we get started, I was curious to know how others would answer these questions. So I took my camera to the streets. What is your name?
Nick Tucker.
Nick, can you tell me your race?
African American.
Okay. So who told you you were African American?
No one actually, but I heard it. Just a common thing that you hear in school, on the media. So ordinary, you think you're African American.
So can you tell me how the continent Africa received its name?
I really don't know. I just thought it was just the name of the continent, Africa.
What is your name?
My name is Bravius.
Can you tell me what is your race?
My race is African American.
And where did you learn that you were African American?
Well, the last person that told me was my mother. That was African American, but you know, we do have ancestors and stuff, so we really don't know where we come from, you know. So yeah, that's where I got that from.
Absolutely. For the continent of Africa, do you have any idea how that continent received its name?
Actually, I don't know where that received its name from.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for your time and answering these questions. What is your name?
Katria Ellis.
Hey, Katra, are you in school?
I got a community, Wilson Tech Community College.
Okay, fantastic. Can you tell me what your race is?
America.
Okay, great. And where'd you learn that?
From my parents.
Okay, great. So you're not African?
No, ma'am.
Okay, fantastic. Do you know how that continent received its name?
Not for sure. Not for sure. I'm not quite sure.
And what is your name?
Jatavius Smith.
Okay. Okay, can you tell me what is your race?
African American.
Okay. And what school do you go to?
Battlefield High School.
Okay. So did you learn, well, you tell me, where did you learn that you were an African American?
I don't know, just I guess school.
Well, do you know how the continent Africa received its name?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And what is your name?
Corey.
Corey, what school do you go to?
Fight.
Okay, great. What is your race?
Black and Italian.
Okay, and how did you learn that you were black and Italian?
Learned from my father told me that on his side of the family that everybody's Italian. That's the only reason I knew.
Okay, and who told you were black?
My mom and my father.
Okay, great. So, can you tell me the continent of Africa? How did it receive its name?
No, I don't know.
Can you tell me your name?
Mo Ruffin.
Okay, Mo. Can you tell me your ethnicity?
From being African American.
Okay, and so where did you learn you were African American?
Parents in school.
So, can you tell me the continent that's named Africa? Do you know how it received its name?
Again, I would say, I don't know right offhand, but I would say the mixture of people, and as far as how they look, the color and all that.
To understand what an African is, we must first understand how that great landmass got its name. Many believe that Africa was named after an explorer by the name of Leo Africanus. At first glance, it looks and sounds right. After all, he does have the word Africa in his name, right? However, Leo and his name Africanus is indeed a lead if you present the answer in a form of a question. I'll take Leo Africanus for 500, please. Who is Johann Leo Africanus, an Arab born Al-Hussein, son of Muhammad, in Granada, Spain, to a prominent Moorish family. He was also known by John Leo and Giovanni Leone. In 1526, Leo Africanus, geographer, explorer, and traveler, wrote a geographical history of Africa, including a description of the Berber kingdoms and Timbuktu, originally written in the Arabic language. In 1600, an Italian version was translated into English, and in 1826, Dr. Robert Brown provided editorial and elaborate notes for the English version. Now, Brown writes this concerning Leo.
Yet with all the suppleness of his race, he was wont in the course of his life to claim Africa or Europe as his birthplace, according as it seemed best for his own interest.
And Leo records,
For mine own part, when I hear the Africans evil spoken of, I will affirm myself to be one of Grenada, and when I perceive the nation of Grenada to be discommended, then will I profess myself to be an African. But herein the African shall be the more beholding unto me, for that I will only record their principal and notorious vices, and omitting their smaller and more tolerable faults.
Brown stated,
However, from the fact of Leo being an African, or from his writing on Africa, he is now invariably called Leo Africanus.
What has been said here is that the continent in part or in whole, was not named after Leo Africanus, aka Al-Hassan, son of Muhammad, but that Leo renamed himself after the beloved northern territories he identified with, which was already known as Africa during his time. So our search continues, but we don't have to look very far because Brown records this.
Africa was otherwise called Libya, and the greater part of Africa was unknown in former ages.
What he is saying is that during his time, the northern territories of the continent was called Libya, and the remaining territories had not been discovered by the Indo-Europeans, even though very much inhabited by the indigenous nations. Browns continue to add,
Others say that it is called Africa quasi-Africa.
Quasi means to have some resemblance to. In other words, comparing the similar pronunciation between the earlier word Africa and the later word Africa. Dr. Brown also states, one such historian is Isidrus Hispalensis. He's a scholar, an archbishop of Seville, and the author of the 6th century etymologies of Isidore of Seville. Now, there are several other historians listed, and I highly encourage you to study Leo's writings. You can download a free copy at archive.org. Africanus stated that
Hispalensis fancifully traces the word Africa to Latin Africa, in allusion to its hot, dry climate.
And Dr. Brown traces Africa's etymology as
Africa, that is exposed and subject to the scorching beams of the sun, the most part thereof lying between the tropics.
So Brown seems to understand Africa to mean a region on the continent that is scorching hot and lies between tropical regions on the same continent. So what you have is one landmass with multiple temperature zones, as it still is to this day. Keep that in mind. Africanus also followed 1st century Hebrew historian Josephus, who stated this concerning Africa.
Will have it so called from afar, one of the posterities of Abraham. But it was by the Greeks called Libya, because it was in old time conquered by Libs.
According to the Strong's Hebrew Aramaic lexicon, Afar, pronounced in modern Hebrew, means dry earth, dust, powder, dry, clay, or mud. Is Josephus alluding to Africa being one of Abraham's territories? At the same time telling us that the Greeks called that region Libya? And Libyans ascended from Put, who is the son of Ham. Ham is pronounced as Ham in the modern Hebrew, or properly Kemet. Kemet is the son of Noah, brother of Shem and Japheth. We'll learn more about land inheritance in a moment. If you don't already know, you simply cannot accurately research the history of all nations without using biblical narratives and other ancient writings as history. In addition, wisdom to understand is required. And Brown records,
In the Holy Scriptures, it is called Chamesis, by the Arabians and Ethiopians, Akubalam, and by the Indians, Basikat.
Brown has stated that scriptures called the hot and dry region Chamisis, and the root of Chamisis is Ham. As you learned earlier, Ham is modern Hebrew translation for Ham, son of Noah. The scriptures Brown is referring to can be found in Psalms 105 and 106 regarding the land of Ham. And Ham in the Hebrew means hot, aprika, or the hot scorching regions that lies between the tropical regions, was inherited by Hamites, but was also occupied by Hamites and Shemites. To confirm territories inherited by Ham, let's go to the Book of Land Inheritance. What? You didn't know there was a book on land inheritance? It can be found in chapter 8 in the Book of Jubilees. If you're not familiar with this book or any other ancient writings that were translated into English, I highly suggest that you become acquainted with them. They are your history books. Chapter 8, verse 10 reads, "And it came to pass in the beginning of the 33rd Jubilee, 1569 AM." Now, AM is a Latin abbreviation for Anno Mundi, which translates from the Hebrew as "from the creation of the natural world." Continue. "That they divided the earth into 3 parts, for Shem, Ham, and Japheth, according to the inheritance of each in the first year, in the first week." And verse 30 reads, "The land of Ham is hot." Back up to verse 24, and it reads, "And this is the land which came forth for Ham as the portion which he was to occupy forever for himself and for his sons unto their generations forever." And Brown states that
Africa is really a Latinized form of the original Afar, and is quite certain that Africa was used by the Romans in the restricted sense of being applied to the territory of Carthage, the part of Tunisia, comprised in that area being still called Phrygia.
Now, as a reminder, Libya was another name for Put, Kemet's son. His ascendants were known as Libyans and occupied northern territories called Libya. It was very common for ancient tribes to name territories or boundaries after their progenitor, and the nations were known by their progenitor. My last source on the origin of the term Africa, before we sum this all up, is from an etymology dictionary of modern English, which is befitting since the first known origin of the name Africa is from modern Latin, which is an Indo-European language where English also derived. And it records, Africa, terra, in Latin for land, Libya, the Carthaginian territory, a word of uncertain origin. The Latin word originally was used in reference to the region around modern Tunisia. It gradually was extended to the whole continent. I repeat, it gradually was extended to the whole continent. But what does this all mean? I'll take making sense of it all for 100 Tyrone. What is? The name Africa was unknown to the indigenous. I'll take making sense of it all for $200. What is? The origin of the name Africa was from a Latin adjective, aprika, to describe the climate. I'll take making sense of it all for $300. What is? Africa regions, being hot and dry, were inherited by Ham, properly Kemet, and his ascendants forever. I'll take making sense of it all for 500, Tyrone. What is? As early as the 15th century, foreigners conspired to classify all black, brown-skinned nations as African Hamites. But why would foreigners do such a thing? I'll take reasons foreigners did this for 100, Tyrone. What is? To hide the identity of the Negroes. I'll take reasons foreigners did this for 200. What is? To hide their own identities. I'll take reasons foreigners did this for 300, Tyrone. What is? To subjugate indigenous people planet-wide. I'll take reasons foreigners did this for $500. What is? To steal land they had no inheritance to planet-wide. That being said, the late Christian evangelist Billy Graham appeared to have been aware of this conspiracy to classify the Negroes as African Hamites. He authorized a 1993 publication of the Zondervan Compact Bible Dictionary defining whose Ham's descendants really are and who they are not. And it reads, Ham, perhaps Hot, the youngest son of Noah, born probably about 96 years before the flood, and one of the 8 persons to live through the flood. He became the progenitor of the dark races, not the Negroes. But the Egyptians, Ethiopians, who are ancient Cushites, Libyans, who are of Put, and Canaanites. I'll take who are African Hamites for 500, Tyrone. What is? Not you Negroes. Lastly, the 1828 Northwestern Dictionary records the definition of an American as a native of America, originally applied to the Aboriginals or copper-colored races found here by the Europeans, but now applied to their descendants. And that's a topic for another discussion.